For as long as anyone could remember, the Galactic Council had been the ultimate symbol of unity in the universe. It was made up of dozens of intelligent species, each with its own culture, history, and agenda. Some of them had lived for thousands of years, while others were young in comparison, barely a few centuries old. The Council promised peace, fairness, and collaboration, and it was a place where conflicts between worlds were meant to be resolved through discussion rather than war. Humanity had always looked at the Council with a mixture of awe and hope. On one hand, it was a political organization of immense power, controlling trade routes, advanced technologies, and security across hundreds of star systems. On the other hand, it represented the chance for humans to step out of their small, fragile homeworld and claim their place among the stars. Earth had not always been considered important in galactic politics. For centuries, humanity had been preoccupied with surviving itself. Wars, natural disasters, and internal strife had marked much of human history. Yet something about humans was unique. Their curiosity, resilience, and ability to adapt quickly had caught the attention of other species. At first, the Council had been cautious. Humans were unpredictable, sometimes reckless, but undeniably intelligent and capable of innovation. Slowly, over decades, humanity proved itself. Scientific breakthroughs in energy, medicine, and space travel drew the attention of older, more established civilizations. Diplomatic missions succeeded where others had failed. Humanity was not just a participant in the galaxy. It was becoming a contributor, a force that could help maintain balance. The day humanity earned its seat in the Galactic Council was celebrated quietly on Earth. There were no parades or fireworks like in old human traditions. Instead, scientists, politicians, and ordinary citizens watched broadcasts of humans being formally recognized among the galaxy's leaders. There was pride, but also a quiet sense of caution. Humans knew that being a part of the Council meant responsibility. They were expected to provide solutions, to act as mediators, and to help maintain peace across systems that were far more advanced and far more experienced than Earth. For humanity, this was not just a political victory. It was a validation of everything they had achieved against all odds. Once humanity became a recognized member, its contributions were immediate and impactful. Human engineers designed energy systems that could stabilize dying stars. Doctors introduced medical techniques that saved species previously thought to be on the brink of extinction. Humans acted as mediators in conflicts where traditional diplomacy had failed. Slowly, humanity's reputation grew. They were admired for their bravery and ingenuity, even respected for their fairness. Yet admiration also carried with it a hint of envy. Other species started to watch human activities with suspicion. Some whispered that humans were moving too quickly, advancing beyond what a young species should achieve. At first, these suspicions were minor. Some council members would subtly question human proposals or delay the approval of technology-sharing programs. But as the years went on, the hesitation became more deliberate. Trade agreements were blocked. Human votes on council matters were ignored. Other species started forming alliances without including Earth, often justifying it with flimsy excuses about security or protocol. Humanity noticed, but for a long time they believed it was simply bureaucracy, a slow-moving system that eventually would recognize their value. The first cracks in the relationship appeared when humans offered assistance to worlds in crisis. Earth had resources, both in technology and expertise, that could help colonies struggling with environmental collapse or political instability. Humans expected collaboration, perhaps even gratitude. Instead, they were met with silence. Messages were unanswered, calls for meetings postponed indefinitely. The subtle distancing began to feel personal. Humanity had proven itself reliable and generous, yet the Council was treating them as if they were insignificant, as if their contributions were unwanted. Over time, the whispers of jealousy and fear turned into visible actions. Some Council members began spreading rumors that humans were too powerful, that Earth's growing technological advancements posed a threat to the balance of power. These rumors were not outright lies, but they twisted the truth. Every scientific achievement, every diplomatic success was recast as evidence of human arrogance or hidden agendas. The subtle manipulation of information began to isolate Earth politically. Despite this growing unease, humanity continued to act responsibly. They did not retaliate when their proposals were denied. They did not publicly call out the rumors. Instead, humans focused on proving their worth through deeds. Scientists developed faster-than-light transport systems that could move goods and people safely across hundreds of light years. Engineers created defensive technologies that were used not for war, but to protect colonies from natural disasters. Humans offered to share knowledge freely, hoping that collaboration would overcome suspicion. But the Council's attitude continued to shift. What had started as subtle exclusion became deliberate obstruction. Human representatives found their requests blocked, their opinions dismissed. Decisions that were supposed to be made fairly were manipulated by older, more politically experienced species. Every vote seemed rigged, every negotiation tilted against them. Humanity began to sense that something more sinister was happening, not just ignorance or bureaucracy, but an active effort to limit their influence. The betrayal reached a new level when humans were denied access to key information during crises. For example, a nearby star system was experiencing catastrophic instability, threatening millions of lives. Humans offered their expertise to stabilize it, but their proposals were ignored or delayed. When the system finally collapsed, the Council blamed unforeseen natural causes, conveniently omitting the fact that human technology could have prevented the disaster. Humanity began to understand that admiration and respect from some species was meaningless when political power in the Council was being used to undermine them. Humanity's sense of betrayal grew, but so did their resolve. They realized that the Council, which was meant to be a guardian of peace, was instead acting to maintain control for certain favored species. Trust, which had been the foundation of all interstellar diplomacy, was being systematically eroded. Yet humans did not panic or react violently. Instead, they focused on preparation, on observation, and on quietly strengthening their position without drawing undue attention. During this time, human culture also evolved in response to the political landscape. Diplomats learned to navigate subtle manipulation without losing integrity. Scientists pushed boundaries in secret, developing technologies that could protect humanity if the worst came to pass. Ordinary citizens became aware of the growing tension, and a quiet unity formed on Earth. The betrayal of the Council, though not publicly acknowledged at first, became a shared understanding. Humanity was no longer naive. They were cautious, strategic, and patient. Even as isolation grew, humans continued to perform acts of goodwill. They intervened in conflicts where they were not invited, saved colonies from natural disasters, and shared knowledge anonymously. They understood that proving their moral integrity was more important than immediate recognition. Yet beneath the surface, they also prepared for the possibility that the Council's betrayal could escalate. Humanity had learned that trust was fragile, and power could be dangerous when wielded by those who valued control over justice. By the time the Council's true intentions began to emerge clearly, humanity had already laid the groundwork for its own independence. They had built networks of allies outside the formal Council structure. They had secretly strengthened their military, not for conquest but for defense, and they had begun developing strategies that would allow them to act decisively if the betrayal turned into open aggression. In short, while the Council saw humanity as a young, easily controlled species, humans were quietly preparing to show the galaxy that they were neither weak nor submissive. What had started as subtle exclusion and passive obstruction soon turned into actions that were impossible to dismiss or excuse. The Galactic Council, which had once been a symbol of unity and fairness, now revealed its darker side. Humanity discovered that some members of the Council had been working behind closed doors to undermine them, to weaken their influence, and even to threaten their very existence. What was most shocking was that the betrayal was not born out of anger or competition alone. It was calculated, systematic, and cruel. The Council had decided that humanity, despite decades of loyalty, contribution, and sacrifice, could not be allowed to rise any further. The first visible act of this betrayal was an attack on a human colony far from Earth. The colony had been established on a remote planet with a fragile ecosystem, one that humans had worked tirelessly to terraform and make habitable. The Council, without warning or explanation, approved a sudden strike on the colony. Officially, they claimed it was a preventive containment operation, saying that the colony's expansion might disrupt regional stability. In reality, it was a test of power, a way to see how humans would respond to extreme pressure. Within minutes, the colony's infrastructure was destroyed, Communication channels were cut off and millions of lives were lost. Cities that had once thrived were reduced to ruins, and the few survivors who escaped carried scars, both physical and emotional, that would never heal. When news of the attack reached Earth, the shock and grief were overwhelming. Humanity could not believe that the very organization they had trusted for decades could commit such a monstrous act. The first instinct was to demand accountability. Earth's representatives immediately sent messages to the Council, presenting evidence of their involvement. Energy signatures from Council-issued weapons, intercepted communications, and satellite footage clearly showed that the attack had been sanctioned at the highest levels. But the Council, as if rehearsing a well-practiced performance, denied everything. They claimed the strike had been the result of rogue elements acting independently, absolving themselves of responsibility. Humanity was furious, but they were not reckless. The leaders of Earth understood the stakes. If they reacted impulsively, it would give the Council justification to label humans as aggressors, and they could be attacked again, this time without hesitation. Instead, humans worked methodically, gathering more evidence, analyzing the Council's movements, and tracking the hidden networks that facilitated the attack. It became clear that the betrayal was not just about one colony, it was a pattern. The Council had quietly created alliances and secret pacts to isolate humanity politically, economically, and technologically. One by one, other civilizations that had once been friendly either withdrew their support or refused to take sides, afraid of being branded as human sympathizers. Isolation, however, did not weaken humanity. It strengthened their resolve. The attack on the colony, instead of breaking them, became a catalyst for preparation and vigilance. Scientists accelerated research on defensive technologies, diplomats worked tirelessly to rebuild connections with neutral species, and military leaders studied strategies to ensure that humans would never be caught unprepared again. Every setback from the Council became a lesson in resilience. Humans began to understand that in the galaxy, power often mattered more than morality, and survival depended on anticipating betrayal before it happened. The psychological impact of the Council's actions was profound. Across Earth, people mourned for the lost lives in the colony, for the innocence that had been shattered, and for the realization that the institutions they trusted could act with such cruelty. Yet this grief was accompanied by a quiet determination. Humanity had endured natural disasters, internal conflicts, and wars on their own planet. They had rebuilt cities from ruins and learned to thrive in extreme conditions. Now faced with an interstellar betrayal, they drew upon that same resilience. Communities organized memorials, scientists worked late into the night, and leaders communicated openly with citizens about the need to prepare for uncertain times. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council remained oblivious to the depth of human determination. They assumed that fear and intimidation would work, that isolation and political marginalization would force humanity into submission. The Council believed that humans, despite their technological advancements, were still young and inexperienced, easily controlled once their colonies were threatened. They underestimated humanity's ability to strategize, to unite under a shared purpose, and to turn betrayal into strength. During this period, humans also discovered something troubling about their supposed allies. Species that had once vouched for Earth's inclusion in the Council began to distance themselves. Some openly collaborated with the Council's secret agendas, either out of fear or for political advantage. Humans watched as old friends became cautious strangers, and neutrality often felt like betrayal. It was a painful revelation, but it reinforced an important truth. In the galaxy, trust could be a weapon, and reliance on others alone was dangerous. Humanity realized that they could not depend solely on the goodwill of others. They would have to become self-reliant, capable of defending themselves, and able to deliver their message without intermediaries. The betrayal also exposed the Council's hypocrisy. While publicly promoting peace and unity, it privately sanctioned acts of violence and political sabotage. Human analysts discovered records showing that previous disasters on other worlds had been manipulated to test humanity's responses, to see if Earth would act impulsively or strategically. The Council treated humans not as equals, but as subjects in an experiment, dangerous subjects who had exceeded expectations and now needed to be contained. Every delay, Every denial of resources, every obstruction in negotiations was designed to keep humanity in check. Despite the mounting pressure, humans responded with remarkable clarity and focus. Military planners did not advocate for rash attacks. Diplomats continued to engage, gathering intelligence and forming quiet alliances with species that had remained neutral. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly on technologies that could both defend and, if necessary, enforce humanity's message. What the Council had intended as intimidation became the very fuel for human innovation. In a galaxy that measured power by fear and obedience, humanity learned to measure power by intelligence, unity, and strategic patience. The turning point came when humanity began to treat the betrayal not as a tragedy alone, but as a warning sign of what was possible in interstellar politics. They realized that the Council's actions were not isolated incidents. They were systemic, deliberate, and ongoing. The attacks on colonies, the obstruction of aid, and the subtle marginalization all pointed to one conclusion. The Council wanted to dominate humanity or remove them entirely from the political equation. This realization did not create panic, it created purpose. Humans began to think in long-term terms, planning for years ahead, preparing for the moment when they could no longer rely on diplomacy alone. In the midst of this, ordinary citizens also played a critical role. Across Earth, people volunteered in ways that had nothing to do with politics or war. Engineers developed faster and more efficient energy systems. Scientists created advanced communication networks that were nearly impossible to intercept. Artists and writers shared stories of resilience, hope, and unity, strengthening the moral fabric of humanity in the face of betrayal. Everyone, from the highest-ranking officials to the simplest workers, understood that survival and dignity depended on collective effort. Humanity was no longer just reacting. They were organizing for the future, laying the groundwork for a response that would surprise the entire galaxy. Humanity's response to the betrayal also highlighted a core difference between them and the Council. While the Council relied on intimidation, secrecy, and political maneuvering, humans relied on transparency, ingenuity, and moral strength. This was not weakness. It was a strategy. Humans understood that their survival depended not only on technological advancement, but also on demonstrating that they were capable of acting with integrity, even when surrounded by deception. Their morality became their shield, their intelligence their weapon, and their unity their strength. As Part 2 draws to a close, the stage is set for the next chapter of humanity's story. The betrayal had stripped away illusions of trust, exposed the Council's true intentions, and forced humans to confront the harsh realities of the galaxy. Yet it also awakened in humanity a quiet power, a sense that they were no longer just participants in galactic politics, but a force capable of decisive action. The loss of colonies, the indifference of allies, and the cruelty of the Council had forged a new resolve. Humanity would not beg for recognition, they would not plead for fairness, and they would not wait for permission to act. Instead, they would prepare for a moment when the galaxy, which had betrayed them, would finally see the consequences of underestimating humanity. They would demonstrate that betrayal, when met with patience, intelligence, and unity, could be transformed into the foundation of ultimate strength. The Council's actions, intended to humiliate and control, had unknowingly created the conditions for humanity to rise in a way no one could anticipate. Part 2 ends with humans fully aware of the threat posed by the Council, but also aware of their own potential. They had been betrayed, yes, but they had also been tested. Every setback, every loss, and every act of deception had become a lesson. The time for quiet preparation had begun, and humanity, for the first time, understood the power they truly held. They would not respond in panic, but in precision. They would not seek revenge, but justice. And when the time came, the galaxy would know that betrayal against humanity came with consequences far greater than any Council member could imagine. For almost a year after the Council's brutal attack on the human colony, Earth remained eerily quiet. The galaxy expected humanity to respond in rage, to lash out in anger, or to collapse under the weight of grief and betrayal. Yet, to the outside world, there was no reaction. No fleets moved toward the Council's borders. No angry messages were broadcast, and no protests erupted in the Galactic Assembly. Other species watched carefully, confused and increasingly frustrated by humanity's apparent passivity. Many whispered among themselves, believing that humans had been broken, that the Council's betrayal had finally succeeded in humbling them. What the galaxy did not realize was that this silence was not weakness. It was strategy, patience, and preparation. Beneath Earth's surface, a different reality unfolded. In orbital shipyards, deep underground research facilities, and hidden stations beyond the reach of standard galactic surveillance, humanity was quietly preparing for the future. Engineers and scientists worked tirelessly, developing technologies that had long been thought impossible. Energy shields capable of withstanding entire fleet attacks were tested and perfected. Stealth propulsion systems allowed ships to vanish from even the most advanced detection arrays. Artificial intelligence networks were developed to coordinate operations across planets in real time, without reliance on the Council's communication channels. Every advancement had a single purpose: to ensure that humanity would never again be vulnerable to betrayal or attack. It was not only technological innovation that took place during this period. Human society also underwent a transformation. Military strategists, scientists, and diplomats worked in complete coordination, creating a culture of silent resilience. Citizens were recruited not by force but by choice, motivated by loyalty, pride, and the memory of those lost in the attacks. Every action, from energy research to political maneuvering, was carefully aligned to a long-term vision. Children studied history not only of Earth but of the galaxy, learning the lessons of betrayal, strategy, and survival. Adults in every sector, whether in science, governance, or industry, participated in the preparation, understanding that the coming years would define humanity's role in the universe. The Galactic Council, observing from afar, interpreted the silence as submission. They assumed that humans, though clever, were still bound by the same emotions and limitations as any other young species. They believed that grief and isolation had weakened humanity, and that eventually, humans would accept their place as subservient members of the Council. Some of the older species even mocked humanity quietly, assuming that a species so recently advanced could never match their centuries of experience in strategy and politics. It was this very underestimation that became humanity's greatest advantage. During this silent year, humans also developed new forms of governance and decision-making that were designed to function independently of external control. Earth's leaders created a council of their own, composed not of career politicians but of experts in science, strategy, and human ethics. This council could make decisions quickly, act without delay, and coordinate operations across the solar system. Unlike the Galactic Council, which often fell victim to bureaucracy and politicking, humanity's council was agile, efficient, and completely unified in its objectives. Every choice made was deliberate, every plan designed to build strength while avoiding detection by the Council's spies. Perhaps the most significant development during this period was the construction of the Aegis Dawn. This ship was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Built in secret, it was a supercarrier designed to embody humanity's ideals of resilience and ingenuity. Its engines used a new type of energy field, allowing it to move silently through space and evade detection by even the most sophisticated sensors. Its shields were adaptive, capable of repelling energy, physical, and gravitational attacks simultaneously. The interior was a city in itself, housing tens of thousands of crew members, scientists, and strategists. Every detail of the Aegis Dawn reflected the lessons humanity had learned from the Council's betrayal: the importance of self-reliance, the need for protection, and the value of surprise. The planning for the Aegis Dawn was meticulous. Humans considered every possible scenario: ambushes, sabotage, diplomatic deception, and direct attack. Contingency plans were drafted, tested, and refined. Artificial intelligence systems were integrated with human decision-making, creating a hybrid command structure that combined analytical precision with moral judgment. Even the design of the ship's exterior was carefully considered. It could appear as a small, insignificant craft to the untrained eye, masking the immense power contained within. Every aspect of the Aegis Dawn was a reflection of humanity's patience and determination, a silent promise to the galaxy that they would not be underestimated. During this period of preparation, Earth also reached out to neutral species, but cautiously. Humans understood that alliances in the galaxy were fragile and often temporary. They did not seek open military support, nor did they demand loyalty. Instead, humans quietly shared information, provided assistance in minor ways, and built networks of trust that could be activated if needed. These connections were subtle, often invisible to the Council, but they ensured that humanity was not entirely alone in the galaxy. Every species that had been helped, even indirectly, became a thread in a larger web of resilience. The psychological aspect of this silent preparation was just as important as the technological one. Humans underwent rigorous training to handle isolation, deception, and the moral weight of the decisions they were preparing to make. Military officers learned to act decisively without hesitation. Scientists prepared to make critical choices under pressure. Citizens were educated to understand that the survival of the species depended on their collective intelligence, patience, and discipline. Humanity's culture evolved to value long-term thinking over short-term emotion, strategy over impulse, and unity over individual ambition. While all of this was happening, the Council continued to assume that humanity was passive and broken. Their spies reported empty orbital stations, inactive fleets, and quiet communication networks, reinforcing the false narrative that Earth had been humbled. What they did not detect was the intensity of activity beneath the surface. The hidden laboratories, the secret shipyards, and the fully operational training programs designed to create a force unlike anything the galaxy had faced. Every act of apparent inactivity was a deception, a deliberate strategy to lull the Council into complacency. It was during this period that humanity truly embraced the idea that action did not always require immediate violence. They realized that patience could be more powerful than aggression, that preparation could create leverage stronger than fleets of ships, and that the element of surprise could become the ultimate weapon. They studied the Council's history, the behavior of older species, and the patterns of interstellar politics. From this, they learned that the greatest mistakes a species could make were underestimating the cleverness and resilience of those they sought to control. Humanity vowed never to repeat the error of appearing weak. As the months passed, humanity's confidence grew. Leaders spoke of a day when they would send a message to the Council, not through diplomacy but through undeniable presence. The plan was not revenge. It was a statement, a final warning that betrayal against humanity would have consequences. The Aegis Dawn would be the embodiment of that statement. It would enter Council-controlled space silently, without firing a single shot, yet demonstrate the consequences of underestimating humans. Every crew member, scientist, and strategist understood the importance of this mission. They were not acting out of anger alone. They were acting to ensure that the betrayal of the past could never happen again. In secret communications, Admiral Lena Harrow and her team coordinated every detail. They rehearsed scenarios, studied escape routes, and simulated interactions with the Council's fleets. The emphasis was always on precision, calm, and control. Humanity's preparation was comprehensive. No contingency was ignored, no risk underestimated. They understood that the Council expected fear, chaos, and retaliation, but humans would respond differently. They would deliver a message that combined power, intelligence, and moral clarity. The galaxy, meanwhile, remained unaware of what was developing. Council fleets were deployed in minor patrols, monitoring trade routes and ignoring Earth. The Council assumed that humans had been neutralized politically and that any threat from Earth was minimal. This assumption, rooted in arrogance and fear of human capability, would soon prove to be a critical mistake. Humanity's silence, their apparent submission, had lulled the galaxy into a false sense of security, making the coming demonstration even more impactful. They had endured betrayal, loss, and isolation, yet they had emerged stronger, smarter, and more united. The Aegis Dawn was ready, the crew trained, and the strategy perfected. Humanity had transformed what the Council thought was a weakness into its greatest strength. They were no longer just reactive. They were proactive, patient, and deliberate. The galaxy believed that humans were broken, passive, and fearful, but in reality, Earth had been preparing a demonstration that would change the way every species perceived them forever. Humans had learned that true power lay not only in technology or weapons, but in the combination of patience, strategy, moral clarity, and intelligence. The betrayal of the Council had set the stage for a response that would be both subtle and absolute. When humanity finally acted, it would not be an attack, it would be a statement. And the Council, for all its experience and cunning, would finally understand the consequences of underestimating those they thought were young, inexperienced, and weak. After years of preparation, humanity was finally ready to confront the consequences of the Council's betrayal. The silence that had lasted nearly a year was over, not with war cries or aggression, but with a single deliberate demonstration of power and restraint. The Aegis Dawn, Earth's supercarrier, slipped quietly into the regions of space controlled by the Galactic Council. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, silent, immense, and impossible to detect until it was too late. The Council had grown complacent over the months, believing that humans had been humbled by loss and isolation. They assumed that Earth would continue to observe from afar, and that humanity's fleets and resources were still limited by political isolation. They were completely wrong. As the Aegis Dawn moved through Council space, sensors on dozens of warships tried to lock onto its position. Every attempt failed. Missiles, beams, and drones directed toward the human ship vanished the moment they approached its shields. The Council's commanders were baffled. How could a single ship, apparently alone, render entire fleets powerless without firing a single shot? Panic spread quickly through the ranks. The Council's arrogance had convinced them that humans could be contained or destroyed with conventional force. Now they realized that conventional force meant nothing against a species that had spent years preparing for precisely this moment. The humans aboard the Aegis Dawn remained calm. Admiral Lena Harrow, the commanding officer, had trained her crew for years for this exact scenario. Every movement, every system check, and every communication had been rehearsed countless times. The humans understood the stakes. One wrong move could escalate into unintended conflict. Their objective was clear. This was not a war. It was a warning, a demonstration that betrayal against humanity would have consequences far beyond what the Council had imagined. They did not seek to destroy, only to show that humanity could enforce its position in the galaxy. When the Aegis Dawn reached the central communication arrays of the Council, a transmission was broadcast across every frequency, every channel, and every known system under Council influence. Admiral Harrow's face appeared on every screen simultaneously. She did not shout, nor did she display anger. Her expression was calm, composed, and filled with the weight of decades of observation, planning, and loss. Her voice carried through the galaxy, calm yet commanding, and every species that heard it understood the seriousness of the message. "You used peace as a weapon and trust as a shield," Harrow said, her voice steady. "You called yourselves guardians of order, yet you sanctioned murder, deception, and betrayal against those who served you loyally. Humanity has seen your true face. You have tested us, isolated us, and attempted to destroy us. This is your final warning. Never set foot near Earth again." The message shocked the Council and its member species. It was not filled with anger or hatred, but with clarity and inevitability. The calm certainty of humanity's communication carried far more weight than threats or battle could have. It made the Council realize that humans had transformed the pain of betrayal into intelligence, planning, and power. Every word reminded the galaxy that humans had been underestimated at every step, and that underestimation could be catastrophic. The Aegis Dawn's presence alone demonstrated the years of preparation and technological advancement. Fleets that had once believed they could intimidate or destroy Earth were now powerless. Energy beams and missiles were deflected, communications were disrupted, and surveillance drones failed to detect the ship's exact location. The Council realized, painfully, that humans had created a force capable of operating independently of politics, alliances, and conventional warfare. Humanity had built not just a ship, but a symbol of restraint, intelligence, and undeniable power. For the humans on board, the mission was both simple and profound. They were to communicate, demonstrate, and withdraw. There was no intention to destroy. Destruction would have been a hollow revenge that could compromise humanity's moral authority. Instead, they wanted to prove a point. Betrayal has consequences, and humans would not allow themselves to be treated as second-class participants in the galaxy. Every system, every weapon, and every movement of the Aegis Dawn reflected this principle. They operated with precision, and their restraint made their demonstration even more terrifying. The Council attempted to respond, dispatching their fleets to engage the human supercarrier. However, each fleet encountered the same inexplicable phenomenon. Their weapons were neutralized before they could make contact. Ships approaching the Aegis Dawn were forced to retreat after sustaining non-damaging, but completely immobilizing feedback from the human shields. The Council's commanders, for the first time in centuries, faced uncertainty. They had relied on advanced technology, political manipulation, and overwhelming numbers to maintain control, but none of these methods worked against humanity. Panic and confusion spread through their ranks, revealing the limits of their arrogance. Meanwhile, Admiral Harrow delivered her message with precision. She did not accuse individual species unnecessarily, nor did she allow emotions to dictate her communication. Instead, she laid out the facts. Humans had been betrayed, millions had died, and humanity had been systematically isolated. Then she communicated humanity's response. Calm, decisive, and morally undeniable. Humanity would not attack unprovoked, but any aggression against Earth or its citizens would be met with overwhelming and precise consequences. The message was simple. The Council had pushed humans too far, but humans were not motivated by revenge. They were motivated by justice and survival. The human crew understood the significance of this demonstration. They had been trained to respond to every contingency. Scientists monitored shield systems, engineers recalibrated propulsion to maintain stealth, and military officers coordinated fleet simulations to anticipate potential reactions. Even minor adjustments, from energy output to communication interference, were carefully calculated to maintain the moral high ground. Every decision reflected the dual principles of strength and restraint, ensuring that humanity's demonstration was both effective and ethical. As the transmission ended, the Aegis Dawn did not linger. It quietly withdrew, disappearing from Council-controlled space in a way that left fleets searching blindly. The Council, still reeling from the message, attempted to reassert control over their systems, but they were met with confusion and failure. Communications were delayed, data links failed, and minor malfunctions spread across multiple fleets. Humanity had demonstrated that even without engaging in open warfare, they could exert influence and power in ways that the Council could neither predict nor counter. This period also marked a psychological turning point. For the first time, the galaxy collectively understood that humanity could not be underestimated. Former allies who had abandoned Earth reconsidered their positions. Neutral species watched with awe, recognizing that a species that had been isolated, betrayed, and underestimated could now demonstrate such capability without firing a single shot. The moral and technological demonstration of the Aegis Dawn had shifted perceptions across countless worlds, establishing humanity as a force that combined intelligence, patience, and power unlike anything the Council had encountered before. At the same time, Earth remained calm and deliberate. They did not pursue the Council's fleets or engage in further displays of force. The demonstration was sufficient to convey the message: betrayal has consequences, and humanity is no longer a species to be manipulated or ignored. In doing so, humans maintained their moral authority, proving that restraint, intelligence, and patience could be as powerful as fleets of warships or armies of soldiers. Humans had taken the Council's betrayal and transformed it into an opportunity to demonstrate strategic superiority. The attack on colonies, the political isolation, and the underestimation of humanity had inadvertently created the conditions for a demonstration that combined morality, intelligence, and technological might. Humanity had proven that betrayal against them would not be met with panic or impulsive rage, but with measured, calculated, and undeniable consequences. The galaxy, for the first time, recognized that humans were a species to be respected, feared, and understood. Humanity's final warning had been delivered not through destruction, but through presence, precision, and moral clarity. The Aegis Dawn returned quietly to Earth, its mission complete, leaving the Council and the galaxy to grapple with the new reality. Humans were no longer naive, young, or weak. They had become a force defined by patience, intelligence, and strategic power, capable of ensuring that no betrayal would ever go unanswered. The aftermath of humanity's demonstration with the Aegis Dawn was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. The Council had expected some form of rebellion or retaliation, but what they witnessed instead was subtle, precise, and far more terrifying than a direct attack. Humans had proven that they did not need to destroy fleets or bomb worlds to send a message. Their power, intelligence, and restraint had already shifted the balance of interstellar respect and fear. Weeks passed after the broadcast and the demonstration, and the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had anticipated. The first sign of humanity's quiet dominance was the disruption of the Council's fleets and communication networks. Even though no one had seen the Aegis Dawn directly during its withdrawal, its presence had left an invisible mark. Ships that had been sent to monitor Earth or nearby systems began reporting technical failures. Communication relays failed mysteriously, data streams slowed, and automated defense systems experienced unexplainable malfunctions. The Council's best engineers and scientists could not identify the source. It was as if the galaxy itself had shifted to accommodate humanity's power. Worlds that had previously depended on the Council for technology, trade, and security began to experience unexpected disruptions. Energy distribution grids fluctuated, mining operations slowed, and transport systems faltered. Some planets experienced sudden shortages of critical materials, and others found themselves isolated from neighboring systems for days at a time. While these issues were not destructive in nature, they created uncertainty, fear, and a recognition that the Council was no longer the absolute authority it once appeared to be. Across countless star systems, leaders began to realize that humanity's demonstration had not just been symbolic, it had fundamentally altered the rules of power in the galaxy. The psychological impact on the Council was profound. Council leaders, who had once viewed humans as young, inexperienced, and easily manipulated, now faced a species that had demonstrated both superior strategy and moral authority. They could no longer rely on intimidation, secrecy, or alliances to control humanity. The failure of their fleets and communications revealed the limits of their technology and arrogance. Councilors began questioning each other, blaming rival factions, and even doubting the loyalty of their own member species. For the first time, the Council realized that they were not untouchable, and that betrayal had consequences they could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, humans on Earth watched these developments unfold quietly. The Aegis Dawn had returned, but the work of humanity was far from over. Scientists continued to monitor Council systems and neutral worlds. Engineers refined technology, and diplomats communicated with distant civilizations, often indirectly. Humans understood that they had sent a powerful message, but they also knew that the galaxy was still fragile. Their advantage came not just from technology, but from perception, strategy, and moral clarity. By acting with restraint and intelligence, humanity had positioned itself as both a protector and a potential threat. The former allies of Earth who had abandoned humanity during the Council's betrayal were forced to reassess their positions. Species that had once been neutral or indifferent began seeking contact with Earth. They were careful, polite, and cautious, but their intentions were clear. They wanted to understand the new rules established by humanity's demonstration. They had learned that betrayal against humans would no longer be tolerated, and that any attempts to manipulate or undermine Earth could result in consequences beyond their comprehension. Humanity, however, responded selectively. Some requests for contact were accepted cautiously, while others were ignored entirely. Humans had learned the value of discretion, patience, and moral authority, and they exercised it carefully. Across the galaxy, stories of the Aegis Dawn and humanity's final warning spread quickly. Rumors of its capabilities, the calm yet powerful broadcast, and the inexplicable failures of Council fleets became legendary. Scholars, military strategists, and ordinary citizens speculated on the nature of human power. Some believed that humans had developed technology far beyond anything previously imagined. Others suggested that humanity had discovered principles of space, energy, and strategy that no one else understood. The details were debated endlessly. But one truth became universally accepted. Humans were no longer a species to be underestimated or ignored. Even more striking was the moral lesson embedded in humanity's actions. The galaxy had witnessed what could have been an act of vengeance, a catastrophic attack against the Council, but humans chose restraint. They did not destroy fleets, nor did they kill indiscriminately. They communicated clearly, demonstrating both their power and their principles. This combination of capability and ethical clarity made humans a unique force in the galaxy. Unlike other species, who often relied on fear, coercion, or deceit, humanity had demonstrated that intelligence, preparation, and moral courage could achieve results far beyond conventional warfare. For the Council, the demonstration was a humiliation, but it was also a warning. They could no longer act against humans without risking retaliation that would be both precise and devastating. The authority they once held over other species had been subtly undermined. Planets and species that had once relied entirely on the Council's guidance began to seek alternatives. Trade networks were reconsidered, military alliances were questioned, and interstellar diplomacy shifted in ways that put humanity at the center of attention. Humans had not sought control, yet they had become the focal point of power in the galaxy. On Earth, citizens understood the significance of what had been accomplished. Humanity had survived betrayal, loss, and isolation, and had emerged not only intact but strengthened. The grief over the lost colonies had not faded, but it had been transformed into determination and wisdom. Ordinary humans took pride in their role in a collective effort that had reshaped the galaxy. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and civilians alike realized that their patience, discipline, and unity had made them capable of standing against betrayal and injustice on an unprecedented scale. Over time, humanity's silence became a symbol. The absence of immediate aggression or expansion was itself a message. Humans had demonstrated the ability to act decisively and effectively, but they chose to exercise restraint. The galaxy understood that any further betrayal would be met with consequences that were both certain and inescapable. Humanity's reputation evolved from that of a young, ambitious species to one that embodied both power and principle. Stories, myths, and legends about Earth, the Aegis Dawn, and Admiral Harrow's broadcasts spread from system to system, inspiring fear, respect, and a cautious admiration among countless civilizations. The transformation in the galaxy was subtle but profound. Planets once under strict council control began seeking diplomatic channels with Earth, often preferring quiet guidance over authoritarian oversight. Neutral species looked to humanity as an example of how intelligence, morality, and preparation could overcome adversity. Even the most powerful council members began to adjust their strategies, realizing that the old methods of intimidation, secrecy, and manipulation were no longer sufficient. Humanity had set a precedent. Betrayal against a species that is intelligent, united, and patient comes with consequences that are inevitable and undeniable. The psychological shift extended to ordinary citizens across the galaxy. Seeing the actions of humanity, other species began to reconsider their own approaches to power, strategy, and diplomacy. Fear of immediate retaliation was replaced by a new respect for careful planning, moral integrity, and strategic patience. Humanity had demonstrated that true power was not measured only in numbers or weapons, but in the combination of intelligence, unity, and ethical clarity. The story of Earth and the Aegis Dawn became a lesson taught in schools, military academies, and councils across countless systems. As the galaxy adjusted, humanity maintained its principles. They did not expand aggressively, nor did they seek to dominate. Their demonstration had been sufficient to establish their strength and set new rules for engagement. The Aegis Dawn remained a symbol, a reminder that betrayal and injustice would not go unanswered. But humans themselves returned to their lives, continuing to innovate, explore, and develop. Their power was real, yet it was exercised with restraint, ensuring that humanity remained respected rather than feared solely as a destructive force. Their final warning had been delivered, and the consequences of betrayal had been made clear. The Council had learned that humans could not be manipulated or intimidated, that power combined with strategy and moral clarity could change the course of interstellar politics. The galaxy had learned that humanity was a force that could enforce its will without aggression, influence without coercion, and command respect without domination. Humans had not sought revenge, conquest, or glory. They had acted with intelligence, patience, and unity. Their demonstration had reshaped the political, technological, and psychological landscape of the galaxy. And in doing so, humanity had established a new era, one in which betrayal against them would be met with certainty, clarity, and consequences beyond imagination. Across the stars, every species now knew the same truth. Humanity forgives once, warns twice, and after the third time, silence follows. A silence that carries the weight of preparation, intelligence, and unstoppable consequence.